The fire had burned down to orange coals when the last afternoon traveller pushed through the door. Mara looked up from wiping tables, the cloth moving in automatic circles. The man carried road dust on his boots and cloak, and she reached for a clean mug before he had found his seat. The inn smelled of bread and wood smoke and dried herbs from the rafters. Mara had kept it this way for years, warm enough, clean enough, welcoming enough. She poured ale and set it before him without asking. Evening travellers at the Hound's Inn usually needed the same things: a drink, a meal, rest that felt solid after uncertain roads. "Thank you," the man said, wrapping both hands around the mug. "Supper will be ready soon. There's stew and bread." Through the kitchen window, Mara watched the sky deepen, blue softening to grey at the edges. Soon she would light the lamps, and the evening would settle into its familiar pattern. The bard arrived as she ladled stew into bowls. She heard the door, the murmur of greeting, then the scrape of his chair at his usual place near the hearth. She brought out the food and set it down with careful attention. The bard arrived as she ladled stew into bowls. She heard the door, the murmur of greeting, then the scrape of his chair at his usual place near the hearth. She brought out the food and set it down with careful attention. "You'll eat something too, won't you?" he asked, looking up with that expression of his, the one that saw more than she wished to show. "In a bit," Mara said. "That's what you said yesterday." She didn't answer, only returned for bread. The bard ate slowly, thoughtful pauses between bites, while the traveller hunched over his bowl, someone who had gone too long between meals. Mara moved about the room, adjusting a lamp, straightening a cushion, keeping her hands occupied. The fire needed building up. She knelt and added wood piece by piece, watching the flames catch and climb. The heat touched her face, and for a moment she stayed there, feeling the warmth press against the cold place inside her that never quite thawed. "Mara," the bard said quietly. She stood and brushed ash from her hands. "More ale. Sit with me a moment." It wasn't really a request. Mara pulled out a chair across from him and lowered herself into it with the stiffness of someone who had forgotten how to rest. She folded her hands on the table and waited. The bard set down his spoon. "How long has it been now?" "Since what?" "You know since what?" Mara looked down at her hands, red from washing and work, knuckles rough, nails cut short. Capable hands. They had once held her husband's hand when his fever had been at its worst. She had thought holding on tightly enough might keep him from slipping away. She had been wrong. 6 years, she said, 7 in the spring. The bard nodded slowly. "That's a long time to carry something alone." "I'm not alone. The inn stays full. There's always someone coming or going." "That's not the same as not being alone." Something tightened in her chest, that familiar clench that came whenever someone looked too closely at what she kept hidden. She started to rise, but the bard touched her wrist, not holding, just the lightest pressure. "I know you take care of everyone who walks through that door," he said. "You listen to their troubles and feed them and make sure they have what they need. But who takes care of you? I manage well enough. Managing isn't the same as living." The traveller stared into his empty bowl, lost in his own thoughts, but Mara felt exposed anyway, as though her grief were something visible. "I don't know what you want me to do," she said, her voice smaller than intended. The bard released her wrist and sat back. "Maybe it's time to stop carrying it. Maybe it's time to set it down somewhere and see what happens." "I wouldn't know how." "You could start by stepping outside these walls. When's the last time you walked anywhere that wasn't between the inn and the market?" Mara couldn't remember. The days had blurred together into one long routine, as though by preserving the inn she might preserve something of what she had lost. "The standing stones are beautiful at dusk," the bard said quietly. "If you wanted to walk there, if you wanted to be still, somewhere other than here." She didn't answer, but something in her chest loosened just slightly, enough to let in a breath of possibility. The bard returned to his meal, and Mara sat there a moment longer, feeling the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders like a cloak she had forgotten she was wearing. The fire had burned low in the common room, leaving only the quiet settling of embers. Mara moved through the inn as she always did at night, closing shutters, checking doors, setting things in order that were already in order. When she finished, she stood for a moment in the center of the room. There was nothing left to do. That was when the weight returned. It pressed in without warning, the same as it always had, not sharp or new, just familiar and constant. She had carried it for years. She knew where to take it. The standing stones had been part of her life longer than the inn. She had walked there in every season, in every kind of weather, standing among them in silence more times than she could count. She had prayed there, but always the same way, quietly and with care, never saying the one thing she had never been able to say. She turned toward the door before she could change her mind. The light had begun its slow withdrawal from the valley when Mara left the inn. She had not told anyone where she was going, not that anyone had asked. The evening meal was done, the guests settled, and the building would keep itself for an hour or two. She followed the familiar path behind the inn into the open moorland. The grass grew tall and wild, bending with the evening wind. Overhead, the sky had taken on that muted dust colour that made the world feel suspended. The standing stones rose from the moor like ancient fingers, 5 of them, weathered smooth by centuries. Mara had been coming here since she was a girl, long before the inn, long before her husband. Her mother had brought her once, saying only that it was good to have somewhere to go when the house felt too small. She stepped into the centre of the circle and stopped. The wind moved around the stones in quiet patterns. Mara stood, with her hands loose at her sides, feeling the weight of her body on the earth. She had prayed here many times, but always the same way, carefully and respectfully, never asking for anything to be taken from her. Now, standing among the stones with the sky darkening, Mara closed her eyes. The wind touched her face. She could smell the moorland grass, the damp earth, the faint mineral scent of the stones. She thought of her husband, not the absence of him, but the memory of him. The way he hummed while working, the warmth of his hand at the small of her back, the sound of his laugh, already beginning to fade at the edges. Her throat tightened, but she didn't step away from it. She whispered, quiet and steady, "Lord, I can't carry it anymore." The words settled into the stillness. Minutes passed, or perhaps longer. The wind shifted, and with it came a sound that did not belong to the moor, a soft movement through the grass. Mara opened her eyes. A dog stood between 2 of the stones watching her. A deerhound, tall and grey, its coat rough and unkempt, thin enough that she could see the line of its ribs. It held itself very still, one paw raised as though caught mid-step. Mara did not move. The animal's eyes were dark and steady, neither wary nor welcoming, simply there. "Hello," she said quietly. The dog's ears shifted forward. Mara lowered herself slowly into a crouch. "It's all right." The wind moved through the grass as the dog took one careful step forward, then another. When it was close enough, Mara extended her hand. The dog leaned in, its nose brushing her fingers, warm and real. "You're a long way from anywhere," she murmured. Its coat was matted, burrs caught in the fur, no collar, no sign of care. She rested her hand along its shoulder, and the dog leaned into the touch just slightly. Something in her chest loosened. Not the grief, that remained, but the tightness around it eased. "Come on then," she said, rising slowly. "Let's get you home." She turned toward the path. The hound followed, keeping a careful distance at first. The moor stretched dark and open around them, the last of the light fading as the first stars began to show. Mara walked without hurrying. Behind her, she could hear the dog's footfalls, pausing when she paused, continuing when she continued. The Hound's Inn came into view at last, its windows casting a steady glow across the darkening moor. Mara stopped at the back door and turned. The Hound stood a few yards away, its eyes catching the light. "You'll need food," she said quietly, "and a place by the fire." The dog's tail moved, just slightly. Mara opened the door, and warmth spilled out into the night. She stepped inside and held it open. The Hound hesitated only a moment, then crossed the threshold. Mara closed the door behind them. Inside, the fire had burned down to coals, but the kitchen still held its heat. Mara found what remained from the evening meal and set it on a plate on the floor. The Hound ate with a quiet, careful hunger, then drank deeply from the bowl she set beside it. When it finished, it looked at her, waiting. Mara pulled a blanket from a chest by the hearth and spread it near the fire. The dog stepped onto it, turned once, and settled with a long, quiet breath. Mara stood for a moment, watching. It was a small thing, really. One stray dog, one open door. But something in her chest had shifted, as though a weight had lightened. She reached down and rested her hand briefly on the dog's head. "We'll manage," she said softly. The Hound's eyes were already closing. Mara drew a chair closer to the fire and sat, the warmth settling around her. Outside, the wind moved across the moor. Inside, the inn grew quiet, and for the first time in a long while, the stillness did not feel empty.